Today we will study about installation of PV system components. So major components which we have studied in our previous units. So how to install that? The steps involved in installing these components. So this is the section 3.4.4 in our course of a solar PV installer. So after fixing the mounting structure as per the customer requirement, okay, because previously we have just discussed it that we have to design our system as per the load requirement. So we have to install the mounting structure first after designing the system. Okay, then the PV technician needs to install the solar panels and other components. So first solar panels, other components, battery, inverter, controllers. So first we will cover installation of PV modules. The PV modules come in a well packaged form. To have a safe installation, the technician needs to find an appropriate place so that the dust setting on these components may be avoided, because the dust that is affecting the output, the energy produced. The solar radiation available at the panels, that is being obstructed by the dust accumulation. Okay, so we have to try to avoid this. Okay, but that is okay. Totally, we cannot remove it. But as per our approach, we should try to avoid the dust setting. So the installer must first carefully unpack the solar panel. It should not be like that. We have unpacked the panel and it got damaged by rough handling. Then we shall carefully handle these panels without damaging any panel. Then mount the modules in either horizontal or vertical orientation above the fixture, along with mounting rails with the help of bolt and nut. Means you have to mount these modules now. So orientation, that depends upon the availability, upon the availability of the surface area where we have to install it. Which type of orientation is suitable in that case, we will prefer for that. Okay, then in vertical installation, the junction box's module clamp should point downward. The support module mounting structure, nuts and bolts and clamp should adhere to all customary norms. The specified norms, we have to stick to the quality that is meant by these terms. Because to maintain the quality, we have this type of norms there, and we have to follow it. So ensure that there is enough space between the two modules, bearing in mind the linear thermal expansion of the module frames. Yes, thermal expansion, that we have to consider, and after that we have to make suitable and sufficient spacing. Okay, next point. Provide suitable ventilation for cooling under a module and to allow any condensation or moisture to dissipate. So ventilation, because temperature, that is affecting our production, like electricity production. So we have to take provision for cooling and condensation or moisture, both should be dissipated. The roof installation of solar module may affect the fireproofing of the house construction. So some of the solutions, because you have to take provision for the house as well, on the rooftop where we are installing our panel. So how to avoid such type of situation? So we should leave enough space between the modules so that firefighting personnel can access the place in case of fire. So enough spacing should be there. The firemen, the persons dealing with fire, they should be having sufficient space so that they can control the fire, okay, or get rid of this fire situation. So place a fireman switch around the PV module in the DC current line. So solar modules, they can be mounted on the rail using pre-drilled mounting holes which are located at the back of module frame. So holes, they are already drilled on the mounting hole, or the mounting where on the back of the module frame, means the support. This is for the support for the installation. Okay, then fireman switch also we should be providing there. Then precautions for installing PV modules. So some of the precautions which we have to take are highlighted here. So what are the precautions? We have to monitor module VOC, open circuit voltage, short circuit current, and check that they are within specified limits before installing the module. We have already discussed in our second unit in much detail about these parameters. So you can refer to that section. The lectures are also available here in the same playlist. Okay, then the installation of modules should be done in a dry weather condition using dry tools. Okay, because moisture, they act as a medium for electric current to conduct from one place to another. So if our conditions, moisture is there, then there is a risk of electric shock. So we should prefer dry weather condition and dry tools. So next precaution is use mounting system recommended by manufacturer. Then use pre-drilled mounting holes. Additional holes drilled in the frame may avoid the warranty. I mean the standard, the structure which is being provided, that should be preferred instead of making any modifications from our side, unless or until it is not much necessary. Okay, next precaution is that modules should not be stepped on during installation. We should take care of that. We should not step on the module. No heavy or sharp edge item should be placed on them. Okay, because that will damage the glass cover of the solar module. Next precaution is ensure accessibility of the roof structure after modules are installed for maintenance. Because we have installed the modules, and if the space we have not provided for maintenance, then our system won't last for a long time. Okay, quality, the performance, that will start deteriorating. So we have to ensure accessibility of the roof structure. Then pre-assembled and pre-wired modules may be used for roof areas difficult to access. So if it is difficult to reach the location, specified point, then pre-assembled and pre-wired modules we can prefer. That will make our task much easier. So next precaution is the corners and edges of frameless modules are particularly sensitive. Okay, so edges, the corners. So there is a risk of breakage during installation because we have to deal with tools. So while installing, there could be damage to these points, which are more sensitive. So like the corners and the edges. So we have to be careful for that. So next precaution is when installing multiple modules on a support structure, lay out all modules before fastening. Okay, so that they are aligned and leaving gaps between them. So spacing we have studied, that is a very important consideration. So when on the structure we have to place several modules, then first we have to align them, ensure the spacing between them. Okay, means proper provisions should be taken. So next precaution, use an opaque material to cover the module during installation to avoid generation of any current. This is for our own safety, for the installer. Okay, safety of the installer is the current should not be being produced in the panel, in the output of the from the panel, because in that case there is a risk of electric shock. So opaque material should be placed on the module so that the sunlight should not reach there, and there should any current should not be generated. Like we are working and the current comes in the wire, then there is a risk to the installer. So we should avoid it. So next precaution is do not disassemble or disturb a module's part. Which led the standard structure should be as it is. We should not make any modification in the standard structure of the module. Now coming to the next component, that is inverter. So installation of inverter. So while installing the inverter, the installer should ensure that the inverters are installed in a location where faultless operation is guaranteed. So some of the factors which we have to consider for making a faultless operation, like the ambient temperature. So that we can say it should be in shading. Direct sunlight we can avoid. Okay, next is humidity. Just as we discussed, humidity creates a risk of current leakage, electric shock. Then ventilation, temperature maintenance also is there. Okay, ventilation that will disperse the heat as well. Noise emission, that is another consideration, noise disturbance. Then possible ingress of dust, water and pest, that we shall also avoid. So the dust should not be easily reaching there. Covering, okay, that could be a reason, but covering should not be like that the ventilation is being avoided or obstructed. So similarly, water, pest should also not be coming easily in there. Access should not be easily there. Heat dissipation, okay, that is also related to ventilation and this temperature, maintaining the temperature of the inverter. So now coming to the next factor, the inverter must be easily accessible with sufficient space around them. This is for the maintenance, for service. Because it is not a one-time task, like we have installed it and now we don't need to reach there. So it should be easily accessible. So inverter mounted on the ground or a wall should be at a height convenient for reading its display with different quantities, the specific parameters, voltage, current, including these. So that we have also discussed in our second unit about the components which we are using here. So they should be easily visible. So monitoring, in that case, monitoring of the system, that should be easy. Okay, next is the inverter for large power application is mounted on ground and is securely bolted to the concrete floor. So for large power application, ground installation and no type of loose mounting, securely bolted to the concrete floor. Connection, there should be not no type of loose connection there. The next precaution is that the inverter for small power application is mounted on a wall and is securely bolted to the wall. Okay, so here we see some comparison for large power application on the ground. For low power application, the mounting can be done on the wall. So next precaution is ensure adequate open space is provided around ventilation panels for heat dissipation. Yes, temperature that we have to maintain for all of our components. Next component, that is the battery. So here the consideration, the factors which we shall consider while installing the battery, they are the location of battery installation. So here we shall keep a very close view of the sources of heat. Is the temperature of the battery that should not increase. Okay, that also consider, we should consider in that case also consider the sunlight, because sunlight is coming, that will also heat up the battery. So here the third point is there, direct radiation of the sun should be avoided on the battery. The location should be in proper shading away from other sources of heat as well. So keep the battery installation away from electrical switches and electricity. That also we have to consider. The next, battery installation should be done in an area which is not a part of the living area. So not inside our living room, inside our houses also. Some proper area we can see like in the outside corridor, balcony. That is much more suitable. Not in the sun. That also we have to consider that. Okay, next is the space for battery installation. So enough space should be provided for the installation of batteries, and distance between battery side and wall should be sufficient. Okay, so enough means sufficient spacing should be provided. It should be at a good distance from the wall, from other components. So next, interconnection of batteries. Okay, first of all, the interconnection, how we are using wires. Okay, for interconnecting polarities we have to check. So if the connections they are loose, then there is a chance of spark. Okay, spark they can cause fire as well. So loose connections should not be there. So next is that as battery is containing electrolyte, and most commonly that is a lead acid type of battery that is more commonly being used. Okay, other also. So in that case, the fumes they came up when where the battery is being installed, and these fumes are not good for health. Okay, so batteries are normally very heavy, and safety must be taken in carrying this battery as well. Because from health point of view also we shall not be taking it very near to the human being or where we are living. Inside the house we shall also avoid that. Okay, and while carrying, because it is heavy, so we shall take care while carrying it. During installing we need to carry. Okay, next is that rolling or throwing of battery should be avoided. Okay, next, while using several batteries, different type and different make of batteries should not be put together. Means a proper standardization, a proper equal level should be maintained. So different type of batteries we shall not be using together, interconnected for interconnection. Okay, same type they should be preferred. The level, voltage level, current level, that should also be similar. Okay, then installation of DC and DC power distribution boxes. Now coming to some auxiliary components. So here we should consider these points like the AC and DC distribution boxes are located near the inverter. Okay, next, the array output wire from the combiner box are routed to the DC distribution box along the shortest route. Like it means the distancing that should be less. The next is the installation of wiring to the DC or the AC isolator switch and surge protection devices is ground fault and short circuit proof. This type of small faults like the short circuit, like the ground, these should not come while using isolator switch. Isolator means we have to disconnect. Where we have to disconnect, okay, there could be surge, sudden hike in the voltage, that is surge. So protection, it should not go beyond the safe limit. So we have to consider these things. Surge we have to consider, ground fault we have to consider, short circuit. Okay, the different considerations. Therefore, DC voltage greater than 50 volt, the two-pole DC isolator switch has at least 5 mm gap between the contacts to enable
safe and reliable isolation. Isolation means they should not be in contact. The two-pole DC isolator switch used for isolation should be having at least 5 mm gap between its contacts. The next, the plate of the DC isolator clearly states the DC voltage level of operation. So that is specified by the manufacturer on the DC isolator. The next consideration is the inverter input should be isolated when connecting to the DC distribution box, and inverter output should be isolated when connecting to the AC distribution box. So here are the parameters which we shall consider, because input, that is DC. The inverter input should be isolated while making the connections. The next is the AC distribution box may be combined with the load distribution box. If separate, it should be located near the load distribution box. The distance should be minimum between the AC distribution box and the load distribution box. Either they could be the same, they can be combined, or separate, then the distance should be very less. So next is the DC PV energy meter is installed inside the DC distribution box, and the AC PV energy meter is installed inside the AC distribution box. So next is the DC and AC distribution box enclosures are connected to the ground, means proper grounding. That should also be maintained.